My mom gave birth to me so I could cure my sister's aplastic anemia and had me do multiple procedures and bone marrow extractions. When I asked if we could stop, Mom said, "We made you to save your sister. That's your purpose." And my sister called me her medicine cabinet. All right, Reddit, this one's heavy. Never told this story online before, but it's been years now and figured it's time to get this off my chest. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. So here's the thing. I, 30 female, wasn't born because my parents wanted another kid. I was literally born to save my sister's life. Like, they designed me in a lab to be her personal organ donor. Sounds like some dystopian movie plot, right? Welcome to my childhood. My sister Maddie had aplastic anemia when she was 4. Parents tried everything: immunosuppressive therapy, blood transfusions, experimental treatments. Nothing stuck. Her bone marrow kept failing worse each time. That's when they decided to have what's called a savior sibling. Basically, they had me so I'd be a perfect genetic match for whatever Maddie needed. Blood, bone marrow, you name it. Found out about this whole setup when I was 7. Before that, I thought every kid spent half their life in hospitals getting stabbed with needles. My earliest memory is being 3 years old, crying in a hospital bed because my arm hurt from blood draws. The needle looked massive to my toddler brain and felt like fire in my veins. Mom wasn't there comforting me or anything. She was checking her watch, asking the nurse how much longer it would take. Soon as they finished, she rushed me out to get back to Maddie. Didn't even wipe my tears or give me a hug. That was pretty much the standard procedure. Only person who showed me any kindness during those early hospital visits was this pediatric nurse named Lena. She had kind eyes and would talk to me like I was a real person, not just a walking blood bank. She'd distract me during procedures by asking about cartoons or what I wanted to be when I grew up. Sometimes she'd sneak me animal crackers afterward when my parents weren't looking. That's also where I met Eli. Kid about my age who was always in the oncology waiting room when I'd come for my procedures. He had some rare blood disorder, not cancer, but something that kept him coming back every few months for treatments. While I was there getting drained, he was there getting pumped full of medications. We'd end up sitting next to each other sometimes, both of us with IV lines, both looking like we'd rather be anywhere else. Eli was funny though, always drawing these weird cartoon characters on the backs of hospital forms. Dragons with medical equipment, superheroes getting chemo, stuff like that. Maddie was the real kid. I was just the walking pharmacy. Never had birthday parties growing up. Maddie did, though. Big ones with all her school friends and tons of presents whenever she felt good enough. I wasn't allowed to join because I might give her germs after her treatments. So I'd sit on the stairs watching other kids laugh and play, while my parents fawned over her. My birthdays? Usually meant a trip to the hospital for some donation procedure, maybe a small cake afterward if I didn't cry too much during whatever they did to me that day. One time when I turned 8, Nurse Lena snuck me a cupcake with a candle. Let me make a wish before my parents came back. I wished for someone to love me for me, not my blood type. She smiled and ruffled my hair, told me that was a really good wish. Tried really hard in school thinking maybe good grades would get their attention for something other than being Maddie's spare parts. Spent weeks on this detailed solar system project, hand-painted planets, carefully measured orbits, the works. Brought home the award, and Mom just glanced at it, said, "That's nice," then asked if I'd taken my iron supplements because they needed more blood that weekend. The certificate ended up crumpled at the bottom of my backpack. Stopped trying after that. Maddie wasn't nice to me either. When she felt good, she'd remind me why I existed. Called me her walking medicine cabinet or spare parts. Once when I was 6, found her going through my dresser. Asked what she was doing and she said she was checking what was hers. Told me my kidneys, bone marrow, and blood all belonged to her. The hospital visits got worse as I got older. Couldn't have friends over because our house revolved around Maddie's health. Everything was sterilized constantly. Parents were terrified I'd catch something and wouldn't be able to donate. I basically lived in a bubble, but not for my protection, for hers. Remember this one girl from school, Maya, who wanted to come over to play? When I asked Mom, she looked horrified and lectured me for an hour about how selfish I was being, risking Maddie's life for something as trivial as friendship. By 9, things got way worse. Overheard doctors talking to my parents about a partial liver transplant. Didn't fully understand what that meant, but knew it sounded scary and permanent. The thought of surgeons cutting me open and taking out pieces of my organs made me sick. Tried telling my teacher I was scared about an operation. She just patted my head and said, "Sometimes we have to do things we don't want to for people we love." That's when I realized nobody was going to help me. I was completely alone. Well, almost completely alone. Nurse Lena was still around during my hospital visits, and I could tell she was getting more worried about me. She'd ask gentle questions about how I was feeling, Not physically, but actually feeling. Started bringing me these little coloring books and would sit with me for a few minutes between her other patients. Eli was still around too, though his visits were getting less frequent. His treatments were working better than Maddie's. Sometimes we'd end up in the children's therapy group together. Most of the kids talked about being scared of dying or missing school. I talked about being scared of living. Eli got it though. After one particularly brutal session where I broke down about the liver thing, he slipped me this hand-drawn comic he'd made. It was about a kid superhero whose power was being indestructible. Not because he was strong, but because he'd already survived everything that could break him. "That's you," he whispered, while the therapist wasn't looking. "You're like made of titanium or something." I kept that comic folded in my pocket for weeks. One time, Lena asked if I understood what the doctors were planning to do to me. When I shook my head, she started to explain in kid-friendly terms, but my mom cut her off sharp. "That's not your job. We'll handle explaining things to Seraph." Saw Lena's face fall, but she just nodded and walked away. Later caught her writing something in my chart, looking frustrated. Parents never explained procedures beforehand. They'd just wake me up saying, "We're going to the hospital today." I'd find out what they were doing to me when I was already there in the hospital gown. Doctors sometimes tried to explain, but my parents would cut them off saying I'd already consented. Don't think the doctors liked it, but they never stopped it either. The worst was when I was 10 and had to get bone marrow extracted. If you've never experienced that, consider yourself lucky. They stick this huge needle into your hip bone. Hurts like hell even with anesthetic. I was crying and begging them to stop. Felt like someone drilling into my core. Mom just stood there telling me to be brave for Maddie. Not for me. For Maddie. Lena was assisting with that procedure, and I could see her hands shaking. After it was over, she stayed with me while my parents went straight to Maddie's room. Brought me this tiny stuffed elephant. Said it was brave like me. I hugged it so tight while crying. She just sat there rubbing my back, not saying anything, just being present. Found out later that was Eli's last visit to our hospital. His family moved to Boston for some specialized treatment program. Didn't even get to say goodbye. Just showed up one day, and he wasn't there anymore. Asked Lena about him, and she said he'd been transferred. That was it. Lost the only friend who understood what it was like being a professional patient. Only person who treated me like a real person after that was Aunt Isabel. She's my mom's sister and a nurse. Didn't live nearby, so only saw her couple times a year at family stuff. But when she came, she'd bring me presents, not shared with Maddie. She'd ask about my interests, my friends, what few I had, what books I liked, normal aunt stuff that felt extraordinary to me. She'd brush my hair and tell me I was beautiful, smart, and important. Words I never heard from my parents. When I was 11, we had this big Thanksgiving dinner. Maddie was doing okay that month, so everyone came over. Remember Aunt Isabel watching me closely during dinner? I wasn't allowed certain foods before procedures, so I was picking at plain turkey while everyone else had all the sides. After dinner, she found me alone in the hallway and asked if I was okay. Something about how she asked made me start crying. Told her about the constant hospital visits, how scared I was about the liver thing, how nobody ever asked if I wanted to do these things. Even mentioned how Nurse Lena was the only person who was nice to me at the hospital, but how my parents kept shutting her down. Also told her about Eli, how he was the only kid who got it, and how he just disappeared. Didn't know it then, but that conversation changed everything. She started visiting more often after that. Would bring little gifts and take me for ice cream when my parents allowed it. During these visits, she'd ask casual questions about my medical procedures. I didn't realize she was gathering intel. One day when I was 12, I overheard my parents arguing with Aunt Isabel in the kitchen. She was using words like unethical and exploitation. Dad yelled that she had no right to judge them when she'd never had a dying child. Mom was crying, saying they were just doing what they had to do to save Maddie. Aunt Isabel said, "But at what cost? Seraph is a child, not a resource." I pressed myself against the wall outside the kitchen, heart pounding, both terrified and strangely hopeful that someone was finally fighting for me. Turns out Aunt Isabel hadn't just been gathering intel during our conversations. She'd also been talking to people at the hospital. Nurse Lena had actually reached out to her after seeing my name in some family photos Aunt Isabel showed around the pediatric ward where they both worked. Different hospitals, but they knew each other through nursing conferences. Lena had been keeping detailed notes of everything. She'd tried multiple times to bring concerns to her supervisors about the ethics of what was happening. Hospital administration kept shutting her down, saying it wasn't her place to question parents' medical decisions for their children. After that argument with my parents, Aunt Isabel wasn't allowed to visit anymore. Parents told me she was causing problems and needed to mind her own business. Felt more alone than ever. Started keeping a journal hidden under my mattress, writing letters to Aunt Isabel that I could never send. Also wrote letters to Eli, wondering if he was okay in Boston, if he remembered that comic he'd drawn me. Still had it folded in my dresser drawer. Few months later, there was a knock at our door. I opened it to find Aunt Isabel with a woman in a suit who introduced herself as someone from Child Protective Services. My parents went absolutely ballistic. Dad tried to physically block them from entering, face all red. Mom grabbed me and pulled me behind her, screaming at Isabel that she was killing Maddie. It was chaos. I remember standing there frozen while adults shouted over each other. Got taken to another room with the CPS woman while the adults argued. She asked me questions about my life, my medical procedures, if I understood why they were done, if I'd ever been asked for consent. I answered honestly because no one had really asked me these things before. Showed her my arms covered in needle marks. Told her about the bone marrow extractions, the blood draws, the talk of taking part of my liver next. Even mentioned how Nurse Lena was the only hospital staff member who seemed to care about my feelings, but that my parents always cut her off when she tried to help. That was the beginning of what turned into a huge legal battle. Didn't understand most of it at the time. Court hearings where I had to talk to a judge privately. Medical ethics experts testified. My parents brought in Maddie's doctors saying she'd die without my donations. Aunt Isabel brought child psychologists talking about the trauma I was experiencing. Worst part was during all this, I was still living at home with my parents. They barely spoke to me except to remind me that if Maddie died, it would be my fault. Maddie was sicker than ever and spent most time in the hospital. When she was home, she'd glare at me and call me a traitor. Started hiding in my closet for hours just to escape the tension. Would sit in there with a flashlight reading books Aunt Isabel had smuggled to me. Fantasy stories about kids discovering they had magical powers or secret identities. Court case dragged on for months. Parents fought with everything they had. They truly believed sacrificing one child to save another was the only moral choice. Heard Dad tell the judge, "We created Seraph to save Maddie. That's her purpose." Like I was medication they'd invented, not a person. Then something unexpected happened. Nurse Lena showed up to testify. She'd gotten permission from the hospital to speak as a witness. Hadn't seen her in months because my parents switched to a different medical center to avoid her interference. Watching her walk into that courtroom felt like seeing a superhero. She testified about years of watching me undergo painful procedures without proper consent or age-appropriate explanations. Described how I'd cry and beg during treatments while my parents showed no comfort or empathy. Talked about finding me alone after procedures, traumatized and confused. In 15 years as a pediatric nurse, she said, voice shaking slightly, I have never seen a child treated as a medical resource rather than a patient deserving of care and protection. She pulled out a thick folder, all those notes she'd been keeping about my visits. Dates, procedures, my reactions, my parents' responses. She'd been documenting everything, hoping someone would eventually listen. My parents' lawyer tried to discredit her, saying she'd overstepped professional boundaries. But Lena held her ground. Sometimes you have to choose between following protocol and protecting a child. I chose the child. After her testimony, felt this weird mix of vindication and sadness. Finally, someone with medical credentials had publicly confirmed what I'd been living through wasn't normal or okay. But it also meant admitting just how bad things had gotten. Started having nightmares around this time. Dreams where I was on an operating table and doctors were removing pieces of me one by one while my parents watched approvingly. I'd wake up screaming and no one would come comfort me. Just lie there in the dark, heart racing, trying to convince myself I was still whole. School became my only escape. Threw myself into studies, staying late in the library to avoid going home. Grades were perfect, but parents never noticed. About 6 months into the legal battle, I had my 13th birthday. No one in my family remembered. This teacher, Ms. Garcia, gave me a cupcake at school. Aunt Isabel sent a card, but my parents intercepted it. Found it later torn up in the trash. Next day, the judge made his final ruling. I was immediately removed from my parents' custody and placed with Aunt Isabel as my temporary guardian. Judge's decision was heavily influenced by Nurse Lena's testimony and documentation. He specifically cited her professional assessment that I was being subjected to repeated medical trauma without consideration for the child's psychological well-being or legal right to bodily autonomy. Remember the court officer helping me pack while Mom screamed that I was murdering my sister. Dad just sat at the kitchen table staring ahead like he couldn't process what was happening. Walking out of that house with Aunt Isabel's arm around my shoulders, I felt both terrified and relieved. Had no idea what would happen next, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't just a medical resource. I was me. Before we left the courthouse, Nurse Lena was waiting outside. She looked exhausted. Testifying had cost her. Hospital administration wasn't happy about her public criticism of their policies, but she smiled when she saw me. "I'm proud of you, Seraph," she said, then handed me a card. Inside was a picture of the little stuffed elephant she'd given me after that brutal bone marrow procedure, along with a note. "Brave elephants never forget how strong they are." Aunt Isabel lived in a small apartment about 2 hours away. Only had one bedroom, so she set up a futon in the living room for herself and gave me the bedroom. I was shocked she'd give up her own room for me. No one had ever put my comfort first. First night there, I couldn't sleep. Kept waiting for someone to wake me up for a hospital visit or blood draw. When morning came and no one disturbed me, I actually cried from relief. Aunt Isabel found me sobbing and just held me without asking questions. That first week was strange. She asked what foods I liked, what clothes I wanted, what I wanted to do each day. Having choices was overwhelming. After a lifetime of being told what to do, I kept asking permission for basic things like using the bathroom or getting water. Each time she'd gently remind me I didn't need permission to meet my own needs. Been with Aunt Isabel about 2 weeks when we got news that Maddie's condition was deteriorating rapidly without my donations. Her bone marrow was failing completely without regular transfusions from me. Felt this weird mix of guilt and relief. Part of me felt terrible someone was suffering because of me. But another part, a part I was ashamed of, felt validated. Like the court had been right to remove me. Aunt Isabel never pressured me about it. Just told me what was happening matter-of-factly and asked if I had questions. When I asked if I was hurting my sister by not donating anymore, she sat me down at her kitchen table, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Seraph, you are not responsible for keeping another person alive at the expense of your own health and well-being. Not even your sister." First time anyone had ever said something like that to me. Burst into tears right there. She just held my hand and let me cry it out. My parents tried everything to get me back, filed appeal after appeal, went on local news talking about how I was their daughter's only hope. Even had Maddie record a video from her hospital bed, begging me to stop being selfish and do the right thing. She was so pale and thin with dark circles under her eyes. I almost caved, but Aunt Isabel reminded me that my parents were the adults who put both of us in this impossible situation. Court appointed me a therapist, Dr. Mitchell. Her office had this big comfy couch where I'd sit hugging a pillow while we talked. At first didn't say much, scared anything I said might get back to my parents or be used against me. "Seraph, everything you tell me stays between us," she assured me during our second session. "This is your safe space." Slowly started opening up, told her about nightmares, about checking my body for missing parts when I woke up, about Maddie's cruelty and my parents' indifference, about hiding in closets just to get peace. Also told her about Nurse Lena, how she was the first adult who made me feel like my feelings mattered, and about Eli. With each session, it felt like weights were being lifted off my shoulders. About a month after moving in with Aunt Isabel, had to go back to court. Parents filed an emergency petition claiming without immediate access to my bone marrow, Maddie would die within weeks. Wanted the court to order a one-time donation. Remember sitting in that courtroom scared out of my mind, still traumatized from the previous bone marrow procedure. Judge asked to speak with me privately in his chambers. Didn't talk down to me like most adults did. "Seraph, do you understand what your parents are asking for?" he asked. I nodded and told him I did. Explained the bone marrow procedure in detail from the donor's perspective. Told him about the pain, recovery time, the risks. His eyebrows went up, clearly surprised a 13-year-old could describe a medical procedure so clinically. "And how do you feel about doing this procedure again?" he asked. Took a deep breath. "I'm scared. It hurts a lot, and I don't think it would be just one more time. It never is." Judge nodded, then asked something no one ever had before. "What do you want for your future, Seraph?" Question caught me off guard. I'd never been allowed to think about my future as separate from Maddie's. After a moment, told him I wanted to go to school regularly, maybe join a club, make friends. Normal kid stuff that had always been impossible. Judge denied my parents' petition, ruled that forcing me to undergo painful, invasive procedures against my will would constitute assault. Also made Aunt Isabel my permanent legal guardian and granted a restraining order. Parents couldn't come within 500 feet of me or contact me directly. When we left the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Parents were giving tearful interviews about how the justice system had signed their daughter's death warrant. Aunt Isabel shielded me from cameras and rushed me to her car. Ducked down in the back seat as we drove away, feeling both powerful and terrible. 2 weeks later, Maddie died. Found out when I came home from school and saw Aunt Isabel waiting with a serious expression. She sat me down and told me gently, even though I'd been expecting it, News hit me like a physical blow. Ran to the bathroom and threw up, then locked myself in Aunt Isabel's bedroom and cried for hours. Wasn't crying because I missed Maddie. How could I miss someone who'd never shown me kindness? Was crying because a 17-year-old girl had died? Because on some level, I felt guilty. Was crying because my parents had put me in a position where I had to choose between saving myself and saving my sister. No kid should ever have to make that choice. Aunt Isabel gave me space that day, just checking occasionally. When I finally came out red-eyed and exhausted, she'd made my favorite dinner. Such a simple thing, but meant everything. Do I have to go to the funeral? I asked that night. No, honey, you don't have to, she replied. That's the whole point. Decided not to go. Couldn't face my parents. Couldn't bear seeing Maddie in a casket. Couldn't stomach accusatory stares from relatives who'd been told I chose to let my sister die. Instead, Aunt Isabel and I had our own small memorial. Went to a park and released a balloon with a message I'd written. I'm sorry things couldn't be different. Few days after the funeral, I got an unexpected visitor. Nurse Lena knocked on our door, still in her scrubs from work. I heard about Maddie, she said quietly. I wanted to check on you. We sat in Aunt Isabel's kitchen while she made tea. Lena didn't offer platitudes or try to minimize what happened, just asked how I was feeling. I keep thinking I could have saved her, I admitted. Lena leaned forward. Seraph, you were a child? Children are not responsible for saving adults' lives, not even their siblings. The adults who put you in that position, they're responsible for what happened. She'd lost her job. Hospital fired her after Maddie's death, claiming her testimony contributed to preventable loss of life. She was appealing the decision, but it would take months. Do you regret it? I asked. Speaking up for me? She looked surprised. Never. Some things are more important than job security. Aftermath was ugly. Parents gave interviews blaming me. The courts, Aunt Isabel, extended family sent hateful messages. Someone created a social media page called Justice for Maddie, with my school picture, calling me a murderer. Aunt Isabel got it taken down, but not before kids at school saw it. Going to school became a nightmare. Whispers followed me down hallways. That's her, the girl who killed her sister. Someone spray-painted killer on my locker. Started having panic attacks in class. Heart racing so fast I thought I might die. After kids cornered me in the bathroom one day, Aunt Isabel decided we needed to move. That night, while packing my few belongings, I found Eli's comic still folded in my dresser drawer. The paper was worn from all the times I'd looked at it over the years. That indestructible superhero he'd drawn still looked back at me, reminding me I'd survived everything so far. Carefully placed it between the pages of a book for the move. Whatever happened next, I wasn't leaving that behind. Aunt Isabel requested a transfer at the hospital where she worked, and within a month we relocated to a small town in Colorado, about 1,000 miles from my old life. She legally changed my last name to hers, Wilson instead of Davis, to give me a fresh start. New place was a tiny 2-bedroom house with a yard. First time I had my own room that was actually meant to be a bedroom, not a medical supply closet with a bed. Starting at a new school was scary but liberating. No one knew my history. I was just Seraph Wilson, the new girl from out of state. Could reinvent myself, just be normal. Except I didn't know how to be normal. Flinched when people touched me unexpectedly. Hoarded food in my backpack from years of restricted diets before procedures. Had no idea how to make friends or have casual conversations. Other kids thought I was weird. Aunt Isabel found me a new therapist, Dr. Miller. She specialized in trauma and kids who'd experienced medical abuse. Sessions were different. Aside from talking, we did activities to help process my experiences. Made a timeline of my life marking medical procedures in red and positive experiences in blue. Paper was mostly red until Aunt Isabel took custody. What do you notice about the timeline? Dr. Miller asked. My life sucked and now it doesn't, I said. She smiled. I see a very resilient young person who survived an extremely difficult childhood and is now building a new life. Didn't feel resilient, felt broken. About 6 months after we moved, had a major breakthrough in therapy. Dr. Miller had me write letters to everyone involved in my trauma. Didn't have to send them, just for processing feelings. Wrote a letter to my younger self. Dear little Seraph, I'm sorry no one protected you. You were just a kid, not a cure. You deserved love, not conditions. I promise no one will treat you like that again. To Nurse Lena, thank you for seeing me as human when no one else did. Your kindness kept me sane, even when your job couldn't protect me. I'll never forget what you risked. To Eli, I hope you're okay out there. That comic you gave me? Still one of my most valued things. You made me feel indestructible when I felt disposable. Thanks for being that friend. Sobbed so hard writing those letters, Doctor. Miller had to end our session early. Next day, something had shifted. Felt lighter somehow. Started standing straighter. Raised my hand in class. Even smiled at this girl Riley, who sat next to me in English. Riley became my first real friend. Didn't seem to care I was awkward and jumpy. Just liked that I was smart and helped with homework. Started having lunch together, then hanging out after school. Her family was loud and chaotic. 3 brothers, 2 dogs, parents who worked multiple jobs. But they welcomed me like I belonged. Started making other friends too. There was Tyler from science class who was obsessed with robots, and Blake who played guitar and taught me a few chords. Slowly building a life that had nothing to do with being a donor or victim or survivor. I was just Seraph, a regular teenager with friends and homework, and a favorite spot at the local ice cream shop. One day got a surprise package in the mail. Return address I didn't recognize, but when I opened it, found that little stuffed elephant Lena had given me years ago. Turns out Aunt Isabel had secretly kept in touch with her, and Lena wanted me to have it back. Note inside said, "Heard you're doing well. So proud of the brave, strong person you've become. Keep being elephants, never forget. But sometimes they learn to leave the past behind too. Love, Lena." That elephant sits on my desk now. A reminder that even in the darkest times, someone cared enough to show kindness to a scared kid. Life was actually good for a while. When I turned 14, Aunt Isabel threw me my first real birthday party. Friends, decorations, homemade cake, the works. That night she gave me a silver necklace with a bird, breaking free from a cage. I wore that necklace every day. Still do. When I was 15, my parents tried one last time to get to me. Got called to the school office where a woman introduced herself as a lawyer representing my father. Said he wanted to reconcile. I started hyperventilating right there. Turned out Dad had hired a PI to find us. He'd developed aplastic anemia himself, same type Maddie had. The genetic component that made me a match for Maddie would make me a match for him too. He wasn't looking to reconcile. He was looking for a donor. Aunt Isabel immediately filed for a new restraining order. That incident set me back months in therapy, but I worked through it. Gradually recovered and built a normal life. Graduated high school, went to college, became a lawyer specializing in medical ethics and children's rights. Used my experience to help other kids in similar situations. Aunt Isabel supported me through everything. She's the real parent I never had. The legal battles eventually stopped when my parents divorced. Apparently couldn't stay together without Maddie to focus on, or me to blame. Mom moved to Michigan, Dad just disappeared. Life settled into a new normal. I joined debate team, discovered I had a talent for logical arguments. Started thinking about becoming a lawyer to help kids like me. Even went on my first date. Awkward as hell, but felt like normal teenage stuff. But trauma doesn't just disappear. Still had triggers. Had this persistent fear my parents would find me and force me to donate again. During college, I actually reconnected with Nurse Lena. She'd gotten her job back after a long legal fight and was working at a children's hospital in Denver. We started meeting occasionally. She became like a mentor, helping me understand the medical side of advocacy work. She never made a big deal about what she'd sacrificed for me, but I learned later she'd been blacklisted from several hospitals for years. Hospital administrators don't like staff who publicly criticize their policies, even when those policies are wrong. "Would you do it again?" I asked her once. "In a heartbeat," she said, "though hopefully now there are better systems in place to protect kids like you were." Fast forward to early this year. I'm successful, building the life I always wanted. Then a letter arrived. First direct contact from my father in almost 2 decades. Seeing his handwriting sent me right back to being that scared kid. Carried the letter around for days before finally opening it. He's dying. Same aplastic anemia. Wants my bone marrow. Claims he's sorry, wants to make things right. Says I'm his only hope. Sound familiar? Talked to Aunt Isabel, my therapist, even Lena. Everyone said the same thing. It's my choice. As a child, I had no choice. Now I do. I flew to Phoenix to see him. Didn't call ahead. Wanted to see his genuine reaction. When he opened the door, he looked nothing like I remembered. Frail, hollow, clothes too big. Only thing I recognized were his eyes. We talked for hours. He told me about the years after Maddie died, how he spiraled into depression, lost everything, got sober 5 years ago, tried to rebuild, got his diagnosis 6 months ago. I asked the question I'd always needed answered. Did you ever love me? Not for what I could do for Maddie, just me. He looked down at his hands. I don't know if I knew how. Maddie was sick from the time she was 4. Everything revolved around keeping her alive. Not the answer I wanted, but probably the most honest he could give. But I did love you in my broken way. I just loved Maddie's life more than your well-being. That was wrong. I made my decision. Not because I forgave him, don't know if I ever can, but because I needed to know I'm not like him, that I wouldn't let someone die if I could help, even someone who hurt me. Had conditions though, proper hospital donation program, one time only, no relationship after, and he had to write a statement about what he did to me as a child for my advocacy work. He agreed to everything. The donation was just as uncomfortable as I remembered, but this time I chose it. That makes all the difference. 3 months later, got a call. His body accepted the transplant. Aplastic anemia's in remission. I felt nothing. Not happiness, not resentment, just emptiness where all those complicated feelings used to be. 6 months after that, he sent a legal document, changed his will to leave everything to a foundation supporting children's medical rights. Note said, "It's not much, but it's something. Thank you for my life." I folded the note and put it away. Didn't need his gratitude or inheritance. Did what I did for me, not him. Haven't heard from him since, which is what I wanted. That chapter's closed. On the 17th anniversary of the day Aunt Isabel got custody, we had a small celebration. Called it my Freedom Day. She gave me another charm for my necklace, a simple heart to go with the bird. Lena came to dinner that night too. We've stayed close over the years. Later that night, I finally tore up my father's letter. Didn't need it anymore. Just paper, just words. Had no power over me. But wait, it didn't end here. Something very unexpected happened. 2 weeks ago, I was invited to speak at a children's hospital fundraiser in Denver. Topic was medical ethics and patient advocacy. Standing at that podium, looking out at an audience full of doctors, nurses, and administrators, felt surreal. The scared kid who used to hide in closets was now telling medical professionals how to do their jobs better. After my speech, the usual crowd of people came up to shake hands and exchange business cards. Then I saw this guy hanging back, waiting for the crowd to thin out. Something about him seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. When he finally approached, he was holding something in his hands, a piece of paper that looked old and worn. As he got closer, my heart started racing, because I recognized what it was before I recognized him. It was my comic, the one with the indestructible superhero. And standing in front of me, now about 6 feet 2 inches with kind eyes and calloused hands, was Eli. "Oh my God, is that you? Eli?" "Yup," he said, grinning. "Sarah freaking Wilson. Or should I say Davis? I missed you so much." Turned out he'd been in the audience the whole time, listening to my speech. He's healthy now. Has been for over 10 years. Lives in Denver and runs an art therapy nonprofit for kids with chronic illnesses. Uses comics and creative arts to help them process their medical experiences. "I kept this all these years," he said, showing me the comic. It was the original. He'd made a copy for me and kept the original. Kept thinking maybe someday I'd find you and give it back. But after hearing your speech tonight, I think you earned the right to keep both copies. We went to a coffee shop afterward and talked for hours. He told me about Boston, about the experimental treatment that finally worked, about going to art school, about starting his nonprofit. I told him about the legal battle, about Aunt Isabel, about becoming a lawyer. The kid who drew that comic saw something in me that I didn't see in myself yet. And somehow, 20 years later, we both turned our medical trauma into something that helps other kids. I'm not defined by what was taken from me or what I gave. I'm defined by the choices I make freely, by the people I love who love me back, by the work I do to protect others from what I experienced. My body is my own. My life is my own. And that's all I ever wanted. Edit. Getting lots of questions about the legal stuff. This was around 2005 to 2006, so laws around this were murky. Now there are better protections, but back then? Wild West. Also to the people saying this sounds fake, I wish it was, man. I really do.